Morning everybody, here I am on my way to work, walking along Oxford Street. It's about a 10-minute walk and struck me as a good opportunity to talk to you all a little bit about something that's been banging around in my head over the last couple of weeks. You will probably have seen a couple of things on the blog and a few things that I've been talking about on Twitter about talent identification and some organisations, clubs, academies that are looking at doing talent identification sessions or talent identification days for kids, 4 years old, 5 years old, and kind of want to talk about why is this happening and what's going on. You hear a lot of people talking about the race to the bottom, in youth sports, and why are people doing this and what drives this activity and all these sorts of different things. And one of the bits that's, Nick Levett, who's one of the, works in the talent ID team at the FA, he's written some stuff on his blog, Rivers of Thinking. I highly recommend checking that out, and also spoke recently with Mark O'Sullivan, and hope to have that conversation up on the website fairly shortly. Recently, who's written a piece both in the Irish Times and also on his blog about this, and his blog's called Footblog Ball, so I highly recommend checking that out as well. Get a bit of a position on this. But so from my stance, what's going on here? Well, fundamentally, my biggest concern about this is the messages it's sending out, which is something I call it, it's the commodification of children's sport. So children are rapidly becoming a commodity in sport. They're there to serve a purpose, and that purpose is ultimately, when it comes down to it, winning stuff at the elite level. So we want to find talented individuals as early as we possibly can, hoover them up, and the ones that get there, the ones that eventually make it to the top, the superstars, help us win things. So basically then, the children are a commodity to be harvested, secondly then to, I guess, in theory, to be nurtured. But the problem with the nurturing process is it's not a long-term nurturing process. We nurture until that product is deemed to be unworthy, in which case then we cast it aside. So we're not genuinely nurturing, we're essentially pillaging, I suppose, is want of a better phrase. And then ultimately, when we get to the output at the end, we're the idea being is that if one individual out of the 1,000 or 10,000 or however many it is that we engage with at that early stage actually turn out to be a world beater, well then the end justifies the means, doesn't it? It worked. The problem you've got is that there's a trail of carnage on that journey where people are, where young people are sold a dream. You could be this, you could be that. You're in our academy now. You're on the journey, and then when that dream ends, what's the outcome? What's the long-term sort of fundamental? What's the result for the young person? And ultimately, these organisations don't care really, because their eyes on the prize. Once they're not in their system anymore, then it doesn't really matter where they end up. So there's a big problem here, and I think there's a significant moral dimension to this. Regardless of the outcome or whatever, I think there's a significant moral dimension, an ethical dimension, which is, I think pressure needs to be applied from the sporting community, that children have a right to be children. And interestingly, one of the things Mark O'Sullivan talks about is that within Sweden, within their coach education system, they don't do talent identification before a certain age because they've adopted the UN Convention on Children's Rights as a kind of core central tenet of what they how they approach children's sport. And within that, it says that one of the rights of a child is to be a child, to be able to play to be able to enjoy themselves. So I think this is significant. If there isn't a legal obligation through that piece of European legislation, then, or UN legislation, then there should be, at the very least, a moral obligation on people involved in children's sport to recognise that this is about children's sport. This is not about, achieving an outcome or using them as a product or a commodity. And for any parents out there who are listening to this, stand up to it. Don't buy in. Trust me, you don't need to be involved in a talent programme or in an academy or something along those lines at age 5, 6 or 7 or something along those lines, to make it. You really, really don't. And in actual fact, all of the research we have at the moment, our best available evidence, suggests that the earlier you're involved in this so-called talent journey, the more likely you are to drop out, or at the very least to not make it. There's so many things around injury, burnout, stress, and actually also the quality of the experience is so poor that actually children are actually being developed in the opposite way that they should develop, and just at the time when they should be exploring their movement and their abilities and exploring different ways of doing things and trying out new ideas and being really creative. You've got some of these people within the academies telling them, no, that's wrong, do it this way, do it that way, and actually they're just producing a fairly average product if we're totally honest. So I highly, highly encourage you to stay out of that context and and don't buy into it. And if you are approached by anybody, fight them. Say, no, that's not for my child. There's plenty of time for that. We'll engage in that at a later stage. So, long story short, what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is, let's let kids be kids. Actually, the greatest thing about that is more of them will have a great time, really enjoy themselves, and have and become lifelong sports participants, which is really important because, as we all know, physical activity is on the decline, obesity on the rise. So we need to have children who've got an absolute love of physical activity. And then the second thing is, by doing that, actually, the likelihood is that you're actually helping them in terms of whatever future kind of success from a talent development or a perspective or a performance perspective might be. So actually, it's a proper, it's a double whammy. We get the best of both worlds. Children committed and absolutely loving physical activity and sport and becoming lifelong participants, and actually some of them will go on and they'll be better as a result of that opportunity to explore, create, try different ways to do things, be innovative without being told by adults that this is the right way, this is the wrong way. So there you go, there's my thing, there's my 2 penneth about it. Hope there's some value in that. Speak to you soon.